Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate you all coming out this evening to discuss this very important topic that we really believe is important to every single stakeholder in our school district. There's a lot of topics that we end up talking about that people have a lot of differing opinions on. But school funding, I think, is one that we actually can agree on with regards to how the schools are funded in Olentangy. So for those of you who I have not met, I am Mark Rafe, Superintendent of Schools for Olentangy Schools. So thank you again for being here. Just a couple housekeeping notes. I know how to work the clicker. If you come to our board meetings, you'll realize all the time I'm very technologically challenged and never just seems to cooperate with me. We will have opportunities for all of you to participate in the evening's activities. I want to let everyone know that we'll have time for questions and conversations at the end. You should have received note cards when you arrived, and if you will please use those to write down any questions that you might have, and our Chief Communications Officer, Ms. Krista Davis, will collect them towards the end of the presentation. So just as you're thinking about things, if you have multiple note cards, just jot them down and we will get to your questions. So again, welcome. I want to start by thanking our School Advocacy Committee for hosting this event. The program was spearheaded by Olentangy Board of Education member Kevin Daberco and our school funding advocate, Mrs. Julie Wagner-Fiesel. So thank you, both of you, being champions in school funding. Not sure if we have other board members here, but I'd like to welcome Dr. Libby Wallach, who serves on our School Advocacy Committee. I hadn't seen her yet. I know she was planning on being here. So I am very, very proud to be a part of these efforts and grateful to also be joined by our school treasurer, Mr. Ryan Jenkins. So we're going to take you through some objectives for our valuable time together. It is something here. This is my 8th year as superintendent in Olentangy. Dr. Wade Lucas, our former superintendent, about 14 years ago, started championing the cause to increase state funding for Olentangy schools. Our good friend, Mr. Steve Kuckler, helped us navigate the bowels of the State House and work with legislators to try to inform them about what we believed was an unfair funding model for the citizens and the residents of the Olentangy local schools and some other districts across the state of Ohio. The school funding formula comes into play every 2 years. They drop a new formula on us. It tells us what we're going to get as far as state funding goes. And it's never been fair to our growing district. And the burden on our local residents is overwhelming. And we understand that. So, it's our hope that we're going to first educate you on what it costs for us to educate a student and how Olentangy's funding is impacted by our continual growth. We're going to develop an understanding of how Ohio school funding works and the impact of state funding on our community. And then finally, we're going to wrap up all that Olentangy is still able to accomplish for our students with the lower per pupil amount we receive, and how we can mobilize and start making a change for our students and our community. So, first thing I'm just going to hit on, if my presentation clicker works. Dustin, there we go. Surprised I didn't go past it. A consistent theme you'll hear today will be the importance of education around school funding. And most of our community has no ideas on the impact of state funding on our school district. However, they know the impact of residing in our area and that the constant burden we have with regards to trying to increase property taxes. And that is simply because of the exponential growth we faced as a school district. If I knew how to work the clicker, I moved into the district in 2003, 2004, and we had 8,586 students in the district. And in my 20 years in the district, here we are at 23, we're out here at 23,260. We would refer to that as exponential growth. And it's simply a matter of the fact that our state funding has not increased commensurate with that growth. And it continues to be a problem for us because we have to continually go back to our residents to ask for additional taxes to fund our growth. It has nothing to do with how we're spending our money. It has nothing really to do with inflation. All it has to do is with the number of new students. So even in slow years, we gained 500 new students, which was one of the largest numbers of student growth in the state. Those are slow years. We had years where we grew by 1,300 students. It just continues to be a difficult challenge for us. We had 687 new students join our school district last year. We've been forced to close registration at 3 elementary schools and overflow students to other schools. So to just put that in perspective, 687 students is the size of one of our elementary schools. And in the state of Ohio, the average size elementary school is about 350 students, and ours are 680 students. So we keep our buildings fairly large to capture the economies of scale there. But historically, and you see, while the percentage of change in our growth is slowing slightly, we're still growing by a large number of students. There you see some other numbers. Currently, we have 23,260. In the next 10 years, we anticipate growing another roughly 5,700 students, which is bigger than most of the districts in the state of Ohio. So we're looking at those enrollment projections over the next 10 years. We're always planning 5 to 10 to 20 years in advance, and we anticipate at this time needing 3 more elementary schools, an additional middle school, and we need to start talking about whether or not we need another high school. And the reality is that we have some capacity for all of our high school students within the next 10 years. We just don't have the capacity in the right locations. So for example, Berlin High School or Olentangy High School is scheduled to be 1,900 students. Liberty High School is scheduled to be 1,900 students. Orange High School is scheduled to be 1,900 students, which are very large high schools. And the capacity of our high schools could be roughly 2,200 students. So if you take those three at 1,900, that's 5,700. But in that same span, Berlin High School is scheduled to be over 3,000 students. So we can't take enough kids out of Berlin High School and filter them back to Olentangy, Liberty, and Orange and keep them under capacity while getting Berlin to its desired capacity. So we're going to have to start having that conversation here with the community about what we're going to do with all these high school kids. And the reality is the funding formula keeps in place funding caps, and they prevented Olentangy from receiving more funding from the state, even though our student enrollment continued to grow and grow and grow, which has led us here today. A high tax area with levies every 3 to 4 to 5 years, advocating with you, concerned community members, for funding reform and holding an event like this. And as I said before, Dustin, I'm going to get, can we, It's not about how we spend our money. It's about the fact, it's simply about growth and a lack of state funding following that growth that creates the issue we're in. Because when you look at this as a cost comparison, what we spend per pupil, we continue to do what we believe is a great job of educating our students for less than the state average, and more importantly, less than anybody we would compare ourselves to. And if we ended up with those kind of comparisons, the amount of money we wouldn't have to ask our residents for is very significant. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our district treasurer, Ryan Jenkins, to go deeper into some of the funding numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Rafe. Excuse me, and I also would like to say thank you to everyone for coming out this evening, an important event. And I'm going to cover a few slides, and then we'll kind of tag team. Mr. Rafe and I will here in a couple more slides. But the pie chart on the left is also telling for our district. It may be hard to see because those numbers are a black font, but 68% of the light blue color represents our instructional expenditures. So on the left, we're trying to give more of a magnitude of what we spend. On the right, we're going to try to give a concept of where we're pouring our dollars, which we would advocate are in the classroom. So 68% directly into instructional expenses. And then you have the red, which is building operation, which I believe is 15%. You've got 2% for staff support. And then the purple is pupil support. Only about 10 cents on every dollar would go towards administrative costs. And I would advocate, obviously that means about 90 cents of every dollar we're trying to pour into the operations and the running of schools and the impact in the classroom. So sometimes we get questions that ask about why the funding formula is so important, or conversely, what is it about local funding, that we are having this event tonight. And we're going to point out a couple of things that we sometimes will get asked on the local funding side. And one of the first questions that we will sometimes get is, you're growing. And when you grow, why don't you keep up with what you need based on the new valuation of new property? And there's a couple of different reasons why it doesn't always keep up. One of the first ones is what this slide is showing. And most folks may not realize that all property in a particular county is picked up as of a tax lien date. And I should be more precise when I say picked up. The value of that property is put on the tax rolls, and a tax lien is applied, and it is always on January 1. That's just the way the law is. So, why is that important? Your tax lien date of January 1, 2022, which I get it, is basically a year behind us. You are getting the tax bill now in 2023. And that's the way taxes work in the state of Ohio. Why is that important? Well, I had this very same scenario at my home that I built in the Pickerington area about 10 years ago. My home was completed roughly in August of 2013. My home didn't get picked up, though, on the tax rolls until January 1 of 2014, which means I didn't pay my first full tax bill until January of 15. So when we have new properties that come on, the duplicate is what we call it. Their value, slap the microphone, comes on to the duplicate. We have nearly, in some cases, an 18-month delay before those homes are picked up on the duplicate and taxes are collected. You may know this if you built a home in the district and can remember. I know lots of people have built homes in Olentangy over the years, but typically, depending on when your home is finished, you'll find that that first tax bill you get seems really, really low. In fact, we will sometimes get a call at the school, or the county auditor has told us before, they'll get a call because in that second year, what feels like, hey, I've been in this home for 2 years. What in the world happened? Why did my tax bill jump up at that second year? It's because that is when the full value of the home finally gets realized on the tax duplicate. The other issue is the amount that it would take to support what we need when it comes to what we're spending operationally per pupil. The most recent expenditure data shows that we spend about $12,615 per pupil. The chart on the bottom right of this slide shows what taxes would be collected locally on a home of a particular market value in the Olentangy School District. So it's a statistic clearly to show that we spend $12,615 per pupil, but if you were just looking for why is state funding important, you get into the value of a $600,000 to $700,000 home before the amount we spend per pupil can even be supported totally locally. So this is kind of a graphical representation of what I meant earlier about how long it can take for new builds to be put on the tax duplicate. In this particular example, a home is completed in August of 22. In 2023, there's a very strong chance that the auditor doesn't come out in August or September and pick up the fact that the house is done. So all they're going to potentially put on the rolls at 1/1/23 is the value of the land. And then they won't pick up the value of the home itself until 2024. Sorry about that. Who's touching, Dusty? Are we fighting each other? Okay. So the other issue is when property values grow. Ohio law passed way back, I believe, in 1976 through something called House Bill 920. Says that any levy that was voted on in a local community, the rate of that levy is adjusted so that existing properties in aggregate, when you add all the taxes collected off of existing properties, there's no more money, no less money that flows to that political subdivision. So as you look at the levies that impact Olentangy, everything from this 1976 current expense down to this 2020 current expense have been voted levies. The general or inside mills is the only portion of the tax bill that is locked in and the rate is the same. A mill is just a fancy word for tax rate. In fact, a mill is equal to $0.001 or a tenth of a cent. So it's just a rate. I know sometimes mill can be confusing. All of these other voted levies, as you go from one year to the new year, you will see that the gross, or when it was originally voted in, it was 11.5 mills. But over the years, by the time we got to the 2021 tax year, that rate has been reduced to 2.65534. That is about, if you want a percentage, that is about 0.2% of your home's taxable value. And then because we had a slight increase in valuation on existing properties from 21 to 22, that rate actually goes down even further to 2.631,495. That's a drop of 0.9%. So what that means is if in aggregate you look at all the existing property value in the district in 2021 and you roll it forward to 2022, the slight increase in value needed to be offset by rolling millage back by about 1%, so that the taxes on all of those existing properties in aggregate added to the same amount of revenue for the district. Now, someone might say, well, wait a minute, my particular property, my tax bill went up. And it might have, depending on how your property appreciated in value compared to the aggregate. Make sense? On the aggregate, the school district on voted levies on existing property got no more, no less, because these rates are adjusted. So now let's look at the components of the funding formula that we're most interested in as a district. So the slide shows formula funding per pupil. And this is, what every 2 years, Mr. Rape mentioned, the legislature knocks around and thrashes about and comes out with an algorithm. It's just a big formula. And right now that formula produces for us about $988 per student. And I should really say per funded student. We do not get per pupil funding through the funding formula per se for preschool. That comes in a slightly different way. So our K through 12 funding formula number is $988 per pupil. Similar districts to us get about $1,700. If you go around Central Ohio, the average is more like $3,400, and the state average is just a shade over $5,000. Private schools get $1,300, almost $1,400. We like to try to look at this comparison. We receive $377 less per pupil than if a child were to go to a private school through a couple of different funding mechanisms for private schools called auxiliary funding and administrative services funding. Graphically, over time, as recently as 2018, we were only receiving $578 per pupil, while private schools were at about $1,287. We've gotten better. We're at $988 per pupil. So the Fair School Funding Formula, which is what the current biennial budget funding formula is called, has been good to the district, but we're still not where, if you were at a private school, that same level of funding would be by the state formula. If you throw in the effect of inflation, and this slide's a little bit busy, but I'm going to explain what we're showing here. So our funding in the most recently completed school year is $750 per pupil. That's the red line. The dark blue bar is exactly what we got in that particular year. So in 2018, we got $578 per pupil. In 2019, $600. It dropped a little bit in 2020. And then $675, $754. And so far this year, we're at $988. The light blue bar shows that year's funding in 2022 dollars, meaning to have the same buying power of $578 in 2018 transported forward to 2022, we need $704. I'll say that again. What $578 bought in 2018, you now need $704. Well, why is that important? Well, we're only at $754, which means when factoring in inflation, we've only seen a real increase of about $50 since 2018 to 2022. What we're pointing towards is why the funding formula, though, is so important for the district. The dark blue bar, if we take what's currently in law and we simply say the law continues to work exactly like it's written, including with what is a phase-in percentage of 33%. I'm going to qualify what that means. Right now, the funding formula, you take all of these inputs and you mix them all up and it says you're going to get X per pupil. But then when our state legislators realize that the funding formula as written might cause them to be constrained with what else they might want to do with other state programs, they will throw a cap or a phase-in on the formula. The formula phase-in right now is saying for each new dollar that the formula says we're supposed to get because we're growing, we're only getting 33 cents. I'm not saying we only get 33 cents on every dollar. I'll restate that. For each new dollar, because each new kid should ostensibly be that much more per pupil. For each new kid, we're only getting 33 cents or 33%. If the formula simply said, you get what the formula says, 100%, each new kid comes with what it's supposed to bring, our funding would increase next year by nearly $1,100. This bar, add those two together, and that's what we would be getting. Same thing in 2025, 26, and 27. I did some rough back of the napkin math today, and that's the equivalent next year, if we were to get that, of about 4.5 operating mills. So this is our, so why are we having this meeting tonight kind of aha moment. This could be a direct impact that the more we get from the state by a funding formula, it's already in law. It's already doing what it's supposed to be doing, but for the fact of the phase-in not being 100%, that could be a direct dollar for dollar decrease in what we have to seek in our next operating levy as we continue to grow as a district. It is very crucial that the Fair School funding formula continue to be in place, and we're advocating as much as possible that the goal should be fully funded. We do a lot with what we get, and this graph shows all 12 school districts in the state of Ohio that got 5 stars or quote unquote a perfect on the grade card. There are a few that get less money than we do from the state, but certainly not by much. And certainly there are a ton of schools that get more than us. And then Mr. Rafe is going to come back up in just a second and show essentially a proportion that if you look at the size of Olentangy's school district, 23,000 students pre-K through 12, there certainly is no school our size that accomplishes with the money they get from the state what we accomplish. And now Mr. Rafe is going to come back up.
Yeah, and that graphic shows visually when we look at it. These are previous year enrollments, 21,332 comparatively to Upper Arlington, Sycamore City, New Albany, Plain Oak, all the way down to Minster with 835 students. The difference though with all of those schools and us is that none of them are growing. They're landlocked, no development. They're just not growing by 500-600 students a year. So those 500-600 students a year at $12,000 per pupil, 500 students is about $6 million in additional operating costs, which is about one additional mill for our local residents. And to piggyback on what Mr. Jenkins said about that increased funding, every dollar we get from the state is one less dollar we have to ask for from our local residents in the future. And when you put that into context, a 4.5 or a 5 mil levy for someone on a $500,000 home, that's about an additional $800 in new taxes that already gets put on top of your high tax bill. So, again, growth and the lack of state funding continues to be our biggest challenge. But we just thought that was a great visual to show what we're faced with here with regards to student growth and the lack of funding, and in comparison to the results that we get. Because again, with the number of students we have, every district has challenges, but ours continue to be unique. We're a unicorn in the state of Ohio. Unique.
I want to point something out in case. I want to point something out really quickly, and that folks may have. You go back one slide. We didn't fall asleep and change numbers on you. Is that is funding FY '22, and that would be funded students, which is a slightly lower count because of half-day kindergarten than head count. Just in case anyone looked at that and said, they've been saying 23,000 students this entire time, how did we get to 21,232? Thank you. Sorry about that.
See, this is why, you know, I've been married for over 30 years, and I always defer to the important people in my life when I go to answer a question. Mrs. Davis, am I allowed to answer a question? All right. Yeah, we're almost done here. So I'm going to turn it over to our Board of Education member, Dr. Kevin Dabrico, to talk about our academic achievements. He's actually a fifth grade teacher, and so he's probably more adept at working the clicker.
These numbers are unbelievable. 23 is a good number for the ACT because that's what I got, and I would just be average and no one can be on my best day. Go ahead, Beth. This is what our kids are doing. They're excelling at everything they do. I took my son to Ohio State wrestling this weekend, and we saw one of the we achieve in everything. We achieve in sports. We achieve in the arts, performing arts. Better go back to my notes because I only have 7 more minutes. Some things that aren't on the slide. Olin Canty was the first public school district in the country. So this is a big time issue thing they've been arguing about how we are on the right side. This is where you will see this is trying to get license. Benefit of the ministry, no office of the year going to it. The new work is going a lot, but it's a very good one when I think the raise, yeah. But still, you will see some sort of mental health. Mental health concern with their problems. You don't need to make it up to you or citizens, at once. It wouldn't change to see that there's anything that mental health care In the fall of 2021, Rick Carfagna, then State Representative Rick Carfagna, referred Betty contact the last summer, Speaker Bob he offered this Representative Patterson good right at this podium so that it's very regards to advocacy with on special education over the past year offers so many folks that they need to allow service to our kids. I could go through all of these bullet points for these slides. Go to the next one. This one's unbelievable. Our kids in our district use these I think that's my last slide. So as I pass this off, but that, I want you to remember, I was earlier talking about that. They're asking us to contact them about what we did. Understand? Your voices matter and your voices need to be heard. We're just asking for a fair hearing and experience in regards to our school.
I'm going to the podium. I don't have the shine off my head. So we've just provided a quick overview here of our financial situation, our academic and extracurricular situation. So what's next? What's next for everybody? Well, today the governor gave his State of the State address, and that signals the beginning of our state budget debate. Here are 3 highlights that I want to point out from today's speech. The governor said that he supports continued implementation of the Cup-Patterson school funding formula. Thanks, Kevin. The Cup-Patterson school funding formula is now what we call the Fair School Funding Plan, or the Fair School Funding Formula. They use plan and formula back and forth. The governor also supports, and will be in his budget, funding for increased literacy instruction. That's great. He also supports $300 million for upgrades to career tech programs. And we support that because we are partners with the Delaware Area Career Center. So those are 3 main points that the governor put into his budget. We haven't seen it yet, but he told us that he put that into his budget. Now, when you came in, you should have gotten a handout. And on that handout, on one side, we have talking points. I want to thank the Ohio School Boards Association because I messaged them, hey, what are you talking about? And then we developed a couple that are Olentangy specific. And then on the other side, we have information about the budget process, because this is going to be a long, tedious process. The governor will hand his budget over to the House. The House will get it and assign it a bill number. It could be House Bill 1, it could be House Bill 350. We don't know yet. They're going to assign it a number. And then once the House gets it assigned a number, they will send it to the House Finance Committee. And that's where the deliberations begin. Once in the House Finance Committee, they actually take the bill and they tear it up into different sections. You'll have one section looking at higher education, one subcommittee looking at primary and secondary education, and on and on. I think there's like 5 or 6 subcommittees looking at the full budget. So all along the way, we are going to be contacting you, because you came here tonight as advocates for Olentangy, to say, hey, okay, here's where the budget is. Here's what the House is thinking. Here's what we need you to say. And when you contact not only our representatives, which are Beth Lear and Chris Jordan, and then our Senator Andy Brenner, but also we will have lists for you of who's in that House subcommittee that we need you to contact. And then who's in the House, the full House Finance Committee, and on and on and on. We're going to go through this whole process. But what you can do tonight is, when you get home, I want you to tell 5 friends and neighbors what you learned today. And you'll be able to ask questions too if you need to get, questions clarified. Then I want you to contact our state representatives and our senator and tell them that Olentangy deserves them to support fair funding for our schools. And then finally, I want you to join the committee. And so we have the QR code where you can sign up for the committee, or we can help you get signed up for the committee so that you get the information that we're going to be sending out on the state budget all the way through this process. In 2019, when I was on the school board, you guys thought you got rid of me, but I'm still here. In 2019, when we voted to go on the ballot in 2020 to ask for additional operating funds, the school board at that time promised that the district would not go back on the ballot for 3 years. Well, we breached that promise, and now it looks like we'll be able to stay off the ballot for operating funds for at least 5 years, and that's because of the phase-in of this new formula. So that's great. However, if we got additional funding from the state, that means that we could stay off even longer. Now, I'm only talking operating funds because we might need bond funds if we're going to do another. We know that we're going to do at least two elementary schools and a middle school. We might need another high school down the road. So I just want to prepare you for what we're looking at. As Mr. Rafe said, any additional funds that we can get from the state are less funds that we have to go out and ask our local taxpayers for. For too long, Olentangy has not been fairly funded. You saw the slide up there that says we are still not getting the same amount the private schools are getting on a per pupil basis. And when we talk private schools, we're talking Worthington Christian, DeSales, Watterson, St. Bridget, St. Michael's, on and on. Those are the private schools. Wellington, Columbus Academy. Those are the schools that we're talking about. We're not talking vouchers. We're talking that state funding that they're getting, $1,365 per pupil. So for too long, we have not been getting what the private schools are getting, and it's time finally for us to get this money. So we're doing everything that the state has asked us to do. As Ryan explained, we spend less per pupil than our similar districts and then the state average districts. As Kevin explained, our students excel. And then thirdly, we have accommodated growth with no help from the state. All of the buildings that we have built have not been with any state help. We don't qualify for the Ohio Schools Facilities Commission money. So we've done everything that the state has asked. The only thing we're asking is that the state now funds us fairly. We're not telling them to take money away from anybody else, just fund us fairly. The good news is that in the past, when we did this ask, clear back to when Dr. Lucas was here, it was basically Olentangy just saying fund us fairly. Now, because of this new school funding formula that impacts every single school district, we've got over 600 school districts in the state saying the same thing. So we just all need to say it together, and that is, I want all of you to advocate for fair school funding from the state. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Wagner-Fiesel. Just want to clarify, or add a couple comments about what Mrs. Fiesel said, and she's been a tireless champion for this cause for our district for a lot of years. I will, if you remember back in some of those slides, come on, Dusty. Dusty gets blamed for everything. This, I got Mrs. Wagner-Fiesel was the chair of the levy committee prior to being on the board that had that huge issue way back in the day. So her commitment to our district and the students and staff has been exemplary for a very, very long time. Something to clarify about how we build our buildings. In order to build our buildings, we have to get authorization from the taxpayers to issue debt, bonds, to borrow money to build the buildings. So part of your tax bill goes to paying down our debt over time to build our buildings. And we've been building buildings in Olentangy for quite a long time. Some of our old debt continues to roll off. So we're able to issue new debt to replace the old debt that actually rolls off and not raise taxes to build buildings. It's a good problem that the growing districts have as our valuation continues to rise. And again, the valuation is the total value of all of the property in the district, residential property, agricultural property, commercial property, the total value of all that property or the property in our district. So that valuation continues to rise. As that continues to rise, we're able to issue additional debt. So the way to look at it for anybody who's been here and been paying that part of the taxes that have been rolling off is that as new people come, they'll be paying their fair share in the future as new debt may be issued to build additional buildings. We have significant capacity. We believe at this time we could issue debt to build 2 elementaries, most likely a middle school, and possibly a high school without having to raise taxes. We have to get authorization from the residents to do it, but without raising taxes. So that's a really good problem to have. So, you know, again, I appreciate the passion. I appreciate you all showing up. This is my 34th, and I'm not sure if you've heard this or not, but my last year of working in public education. And it really does, in many ways, make me sad to say that, because this is certainly one fight. And for those of you who know me, I'm up for a good fight now and again, but this is one fight I want to finish. And I want to win. We like to win in Olentangy. And it's something in terms of fighting for fairness, fighting for what's right for our residents, is I know something we all can agree on. And it's troubling because as I started in education in 1987 as a graduate assistant football coach at John Carroll University, I got my teaching license and started teaching in 1989. I've been a principal, a teacher, a coach, and now superintendent for 8 years. And I've never felt this feeling that I have that public education is under attack like no other time it's been in my career of 34 years of working education. How many of you attended a public school? Show of hands. Look around the room. Look around the room. And again, you hear people talk about public education failing. And if you only read social media or certain news outlets from either end of the political spectrum, you hear about public education failing. And it's not failing here in Olentangy. That's why you chose to move here, to live here, to raise your children here. And we have to stand up and fight, because public education is the opportunity that we present all children with that will enable them to earn a living wage and be any of our neighbors in the future. That's all we're trying to do, is prepare our kids for the next phase of their learning, to have them prepared to be educated citizens of this great state and this great nation. And we're not failing. There are districts that are having difficulties passing some of the state tests, but their challenges are different than the vast majority of the public schools in Ohio. And again, I thank you so much for coming together to help us fight this fight. So with that, we'll take what questions you might have.
Well done. Okay, I have grouped questions together more at the state level, the local level, and then Olentangy. If you have questions as this conversation goes, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and I will come get your question. And I think some of these questions, obviously you all can decide, thank you, what direction or who you would like to have answered them. Alrighty. In regards to the state, don't we have a rainy day fund and can't we spend that on education?
I will take that.
I knew it.
This is my favorite one. I got to do this at the school board meeting the other night. Currently, the state is sitting on $3.5 billion in the rainy day fund. Since April 2020, every single month, the state has collected more revenue than it projected. It's in a great place. I remember, and so does Steve Kuckler, we remember when the rainy day fund was 89 cents. The cost of, if we're talking about fully funding this formula, the cost to fully fund it for every single school district in the state is 375 million. And we're sitting on 3.5 billion. So it's 375 million more that we would need to fully fund this for every school district in the state.
And the number is even less significant if you look at funding the schools that don't receive as much as private schools. And we've got that. We actually got that into two budgets. Governor Kasich years ago line item vetoed an amendment to the budget bill that would have given us about $1,400 per pupil in state funding, matching the private school funding. And actually Governor DeWine vetoed it once, that same language once before. So we've gotten the language into the budget bill across the goal line, but have had it vetoed. And with all varying excuses, and again, the state legislators and the governor have budget constraints just like all of us. But when you talk about a surplus and the ability to actually fund the formula, the bipartisan formula that was developed by the legislators and school officials, the money is there to do it now like it's never been. And so that's why we really want to push hard on this budget process. Because a budget is set the governor drops a biennium budget. So every 2 years he puts his budget in place. And it's great that Governor DeWine just won his reelection and probably can't run again. So I think he can really push and support us on this initiative.
Mr. Rafe, can I add one thing, please? Let's be crystal clear what the ask is. We're asking you to click on the QR code. Let us know you'll be part of the effort, because our goal is to put people in contact, various levels. It's not multi-level marketing. Whether you want to do a text message, a phone call, sit down with a legislator, we want to put people in a position where they can be successful and let the legislators know what their expectation is, which is fair school funding for Olentangy local school district. Next question.
Yep. This is somewhat related. We talked about the rainy day fund for the state. This question is, what other ways would the state of Ohio consider to use to fund public education in addition to or instead of property taxes? And then a follow-up to that is, what percentage of revenue for public education comes from property taxes?
That's a Ryan.
To go away from first part of that question, to go away from property taxes would require a fundamental shift in the way all political subdivisions in the state of Ohio are funded, because it's beyond just schools, townships, which townships, the services you would get would be fire, potentially police, counties, sheriff, cities and municipalities. So that would be a very transformational way of thinking to abandon property taxes. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying that hundreds of years, literally, of Ohio governance is based on local property taxes. I think the second part of that question was, what percentage of our funding comes from local property taxes?
Yes.
So in Olentangy's case, the best way to put it is, we operationally get somewhere on the order of $23 to $24 million in state funding, while we're getting about $185 million in local property taxes. Total general fund revenues are somewhere on the order of $300 million. So that is just a little bit below 2/3 of our funding coming from local property taxes as a district.
Add to that. I want to add to that too. The district that Ryan came from, they had income tax. Local entities like a school board could enact an income tax instead of a property tax. Usually when the schools when they enact an income tax, it's because they don't have commercial property. And so like Pickerington doesn't have the amount of commercial property value that we do. And so if we enacted an income tax, it could be just a regular income tax or an earned income tax, you're cutting out then what you would earn off of those commercial properties. And as we get more commercial properties in our district, we see that increase. And so you'll see some school districts like Bexley has a income tax, but we looked at it a couple years ago, and you actually have to ask more money from your residents to make up the difference that you wouldn't be getting from the commercial property taxes.
Yeah, we do an analysis on that every roughly 5 years to see where we are and does it make sense? And has our, residential number pushed past what our commercial number is? And the another key point in all of this from our fairness, the state gets their money from states, mostly state sales tax and income tax. And so for the residents of our district, for every dollar we send to the state in income tax, every dollar that they collect from Delaware County in state sales tax, we get about 4 to 4.5 cents back on the dollar in terms of school funding. Other districts get back $1 or more. The state average is about 68 cents. So again, from a matter of fairness of what we are all sending to the state in terms of sales tax and income tax, it's simply not fair what's coming back to us. The other point, I had a really good point to make, but at my advanced age, like time I made the other one, it'll come back to me, trust me.
All right, while you're thinking about that,
I was going to add, Krista, if you don't mind, just one, that same property tax, beg your pardon, that same income tax in Pickerington, which was 1%, was worth about 15 mils. So I know sometimes folks think about income taxes. They normally are not regarded. I don't know, you guys have discussed this, I'm sure, as a board team. They're just normally not regarded as a very viable option, especially in a community like Olentangy.
I got it, remembered. See, thank you for the pause. Now, there has been some talk at the state level about consolidating all the property taxes that are collected throughout the entire state of Ohio and pooling them and then pushing them back out to fund schools all throughout the state as a mechanism. I don't tend to like that. A central tenet of schools in Ohio is local control. And local control for us means how much are we all willing to tax ourselves to educate our children to the level that we want. So on some level, I'm okay with the notion that people that move here, choose to raise their families here, understand what the tax burden is, and we've all made that choice. We're just trying to figure out a way to continue to make that tax burden become less and less. Because I think we should all be, if we're willing to live here and pay a little bit more because we want to have all those opportunities that Dr. Dabrico showed on the screen, that's okay. And if somebody else somewhere else doesn't have that or doesn't have that ability to raise the funds in their district, that's fine. And I'm okay with the state making up for that to some degree. But what they've continually done to us over the last 30 years is simply not fair. Thank you.
all right. So when the phase-in is applied to the Fair School Funding formula, will all districts be affected the same way?
So I'm hearing Julie say no, and I was just simply going to answer that if the phase-in goes to 100%, the formula will work essentially the same, but not all schools are growing. So in Olentangy's case, we're growing, and ultimately that's what the formula should do, is provide more funding per pupil. If your school isn't growing, then there's really, in some ways, not the same pressing need for an increase in revenue. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, Julie. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, no, that's and also in our our state constitution, it says that they have to fund schools, but they also say that the locals also have to fund schools. So it's been that the locals do have to put some money in, and I think that, like Mr. Rafe said, I think that's fair. So you would still have some school districts getting more money on a per pupil level than we would, but they have different needs. So yes, I want fairness. And so I think it's fair what we're asking for. We're not asking to be fully funded, but if you compare us to Morgan County, there's one school district in Morgan County and that's it. And that's Southern Ohio. They can't afford, unfortunately, what we can. And so, yes, they should get more money because those kids deserve an education too. So it's not like a level playing field that every school district gets $7,500. With the Fair School Funding Formula, it still takes into consideration what your community can afford. They look at that.
All right. Could you please review again or explain why our taxes go up when effective rate is going down?
Yeah, that's a common question. It's going to depend on how fast your home appreciated in value compared to kind of the overall average in the community. Here's a for instance. If on aggregate properties increased by 15%, then not exactly, but it's close enough that you should get hopefully the concept, then you would expect tax rates to drop by 15%. So everyone follow me so far. Aggregate property values up by 15. That means aggregate rates are going to drop by 15. But what if your home appreciated by 30%? That's why you can end up with a tax bill going up. It depends on how your home fared versus the overall average in the district. Again, remember too on that slide, and would you mind, Dusty or Amanda, going back to
I know where you're going. Inside
Yep.
Village?
Yep. By law, that first line, inside mills, that is one, as you can see, that's 5 roughly 47ths of the tax rate that doesn't change. That's the law. There are 10 total mills that are called inside mills, and they're locked in. They do not change. Our share of the 10 is we get 5. And then the other 5 would be divided up depending on overlapping jurisdictions between the county and Orange Township or Genoa Township or Liberty Township. But it all adds up to 10 mills, which is 0.1% when it comes to rate. That doesn't change. Everything else, as values go up, those tax rates go down. But on average, if your home appreciates faster than that aggregate average, yes, you're going to see your tax bill go up. But it won't be, I know what most people think, especially this coming year. Well, I should say the year we're in right now. 2023 is a complete reappraisal in Delaware County. I just lived through it in Fairfield County. 2022, a third of the counties go each year. My property value last year in Pickerington went up 32%. And I know most people would just immediately have a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh no, my tax bill is going to go up 32%. And it's not. Because even though property values in my area went up in aggregate 27%, that means that my 32%, I'm going to see an increase, but my increase was more on the order of about 12%. So I know most people think your values go up by X percent, my taxes go up by X percent. And this is why they don't. You could also be that one homeowner, and I know most people, I laugh about this because I've never had anyone come up to me and say, yep, that was me. Let's say your property value went up 10% and most of the properties around you went up 25. You could actually see your tax bill go down. Yeah, I've never had anyone come up and tell me that they were in that case. They probably don't say much about it and think, did anyone notice that? But that is why you could potentially see your taxes go up because your home appreciated faster than the average. And I wanted to correct one thing, Krista. I said earlier 185 million. I should have said 200 million. It's still 2/3. So our local real estate taxes are about 2/3 of our general fund.
All right. So how did we get in this situation, and why and how are we so poorly funded from the state?
What?
Each funding formula builds on the one previous, because normally what the state will do is have some level of guarantee and or some level of cap. And normally what the state tries to do is to make sure that no school gets less in a new funding formula than they were getting. So over the years, what happens is as layers,
Even if their enrollment is declining.
that's correct. So over the years, what happens is the metrics get so out of whack that you end up where we are, where as recently as 2018, we were getting $500 a pupil. And so then when they try to fix that, imagine, just putting layer after layer of paint on top of, eventually you got to scrape it all off and get back to, what something should be doing with base cost. And that's what they try to do with the Fair School Funding Formula, which is why so many people think, don't abandon this formula. And I know Mr. Rafe, I think, had some things to add to that too.
Yeah, and it is it's a politics game. The state is, the three big ticket items of state funds are education, medication, and incarceration. Schools, Medicaid for the poor, prisons. We argue if we put more money in it at the front end for education, we'd probably spend less money with unhealthy people and people in poverty, and less money on prisons. So invest in it in the front end, you'll get results on the back end. But the other reality is that there's very few districts in the state that just are subjected to what we have been subjected to with state funding. And when you look at Upper Arlington, New Albany, Sycamore City, Solon City, Olentangy, Chagrin Falls, Highland Local, which is Medina County, Aurora, Madeira, Steubenville is the only district on that list that has a significant, Dr. Dabergo talked about the large number of students we have in poverty, not as a percentage, but a large number overall. Those are all wealthy districts. So the legislators have simply taken the position that we can afford this, and they refuse to step forward and fix it. And the argument has always been, we don't have the money. They don't have that argument now. They have the money. They can fix it. So that's why we have to strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah. Mr. Rafe, I would also suggest you look at what causes things to change. We could spend hours talking about every budget all the way back to the beginning of what got us here. But what can make a difference is when you go home and message 5 people, say, can you believe what we get from the state? And when you share that frustration, it can change with this group of folks in the room. There's plenty of people to cause a change in this room right now. And then you talk to your social network, your neighbors, and explain to them what's going on. It's really clear. If we are able to advocate for fair funding, we can extend our levy. That's a big deal, and that's a fight worth making. When I talk to my neighbors like Molly, and she couldn't believe it. She told me months ago, you better tell me when this is because I'll be there. It's befuddling. At the last finance and audit meeting, a gentleman looked at me and said, you got to be kidding me, $300 less than a private school. But it can change now. We can't change the past budgets, they're done, but we can make our voices heard for this budget.
So that piggybacks into my next set of questions. If you could, I know you've kind of hit on this in a lot of different ways, but I'm going to kind of go through the questions because they interweave with each other. What should community members do to ensure our representatives fully fund the formula? Do our elected representatives actually support the fair funding formula? And how can we mobilize our entire community, the taxpayers, corporations, nonprofits, parents, families, students, staff, places of worship?
I can't answer if they fully support the fair funding formula. The last many budgets, as Chris Jordan has been in office, I think he's voted no on all of them. And on every budget, there is a state funding formula in it. So I can't say that about Chris. Senator Brenner has been receptive to us. I will say that, but when I asked him in November, I was at the Ohio School Boards Association Capitol Conference in a room full of about 200 people, superintendents, board members, and treasurers. And I asked him there point blank, will the fair school funding formula be fully funded? And he said no. So, and then Beth Lear is new, so I haven't, although she touts herself as an education consultant, I don't know what she's consulted on, but she's new, and so we'll have to see how she votes.
Julie, just, I know you're answering part of the kind of multi-level questions there, but we did also have a question about Chris Jordan specifically. Does he support public education in your opinion, and do you happen to know his voting record for this?
Yeah, the school funding formula is always in the budget, and he's voted no on the budget since I can remember. So, we've reached out to him. I will tell you, Andy Brenner's will at least return our phone calls. I haven't talked to Chris in a while. Beth Lear participated in our candidates forum. So I think they'll listen. And remember, they don't just represent Olentangy. There are other districts in play here too. And the other districts will benefit from this fair school funding plan as well. I would hope that they do for all of their constituents.
We're okay on time, so I'll add this. I'm very interested in this upcoming vote, and I'm going to advocate for every person in our that has part of Olentangy in its district. My kids asked me for 5 years for a cat. I said no for 4.5. And I finally said yes because the time was right. And the time is right now for fair funding. So we're going to advocate to all of our legislators and ask them to support fair funding because it benefits the taxpayers in the district that they represent.
And to that end, could we speak to exactly how we can mobilize, what we can do to ensure that our representatives vote for that budget?
Yes. It used to be we would send Dr. Lucas out, and he would go and talk to our representatives and our senator. And we realized, well, he's only one vote because that's what they care about. The voices that they hear, they see as votes. And so the more people that we can get them to hear, the better off we will all be. So our collective voice needs to be heard. You can use those talking points that we handed out tonight, and you can call and email our 3 elected officials tonight. As soon as we get additional information on when the House Finance Committee is going to start on the budget, we'll say, okay, go ahead. Here are the House Finance Committee members, and here are the members of the Primary and Secondary Education Subcommittee that are going to be hearing these bills. And it might be that you need to go downtown and testify. How many times has Holly Hansen been downtown? She's been downtown a lot at the State House, and so has Steve Guckler. And we need a lot of people to go down there. And so when we say you're going to go and testify, we'll help you write what you're going to say in front of a subcommittee or the full finance committee. We will help you do that. We just need more people to show up. I'll tell you, we see people down there, with their buttons on, whatever issue they're supporting. well, we need to wear Olentangy blue, to go down there when they see us. It used to be that when Representative Cupp saw me at the State House, he would call me Olentangy. So he was sick of seeing me. He couldn't remember my name, but he knew me from Olentangy. He'd say, "Hey, Olentangy." And so that's what we need the people at the State House to do, because it's going to take more than the 3 votes of our elected officials. It's going to take the majority of the House and Senate. Plus the governor, we got to get his signature too.
And I would add that, when you talk about thinking about advocating with 3 or 4 or 5 friends, or in your social groups or on social media or any of those kind of things, if you know someone who lives in Upper Arlington, New Albany, Sycamore, Solon, those are people that we want to help. We want to contact to come and help get in this fight with us. And there we will publish those legislators also, so that we can contact them. And it's so much more powerful and impactful when a resident who doesn't necessarily have the same kind of, say, interest that I might as superintendent, I just come down there and they see me as a whiny superintendent who doesn't want to run a levy campaign, which isn't, it's not about me not wanting to do the work in the future to get what we need to support our kids. It's about trying to advocate for what's fair for our residents. So, if you know people throughout the state in those other types of school districts, or any school district for that matter, because the Fair School Funding Plan will benefit all districts in Ohio.
So we will be sharing this PowerPoint, and we'll be sharing this back to you. Our video that we're creating tonight will be posting on our school advocacy webpage, and we will continue to share information with the community on when the time is right, as Julie said. So while we're putting the QR code back up, if Olentangy Schools continues to receive additional funding, what are the most critical funding needs in the next 5, 10, and 15 years?
Go ahead, sir. You got it.
I would like to extend that levy as long as I can. When we worked hard during COVID to have that levy passed, we said 3 years. Now it's 5. Let's extend that levy. That's goal number 1, is to extend the levy. Well, I don't know how much we can go off script here, but there's no hidden list of adding higher quality paper in the restrooms. That's not there. We just want to be able to tell our residents, we're not coming back right now. Mission accomplished. This levy cycle is going 7 years, or whatever it is. That's the goal, because you've done enough, and now the state needs to do their share.
And I, when people talk to me about what would we add if we had all of the funding we could possibly get from the state, and I'm like, I always think, what more can we add? I mean, we have 29 varsity sports. We have, 4 different painting classes. We have, so many electives and all the different programs that we have. We've built. When we talk about a 5-year forecast, what we have to look at is, for every dollar we spend today, that compounds, and it's like spending $5 in the future. So every single time, our mindset in Olentangy is if we're going to spend $1 today, how can we figure out an efficiency to save $1? Because we know the next levy, given the funding issues we have, we know the next levy is not an if, it's a when. And we always have to try to be minimizing what that levy ask amount is, so that we can develop a number that we know will pass. And 6, 7, 8, 10.5 every 3 years is simply not sustainable. So we're always trying to figure that out. I am preparing kind of an exit memo for the board. If I were going to be here another 10 years, these are the things I'd be focused on. I think there's certainly an area, a need for us to continue to look at how we're delivering instruction in the best possible manner, and how we leverage and utilize technology in those regards. But if you're going to do that, you need to have people help the teachers know how to leverage instructional technology resources to improve instruction and improve achievement. We are looking at adding school resource officers in our we have school resource officers dedicated to all of our high schools. We are looking at adding them to all of our middle schools. We're not looking at them, at all the elementary schools because quite honestly, they have 16, 17, 18 full-time police officers, school resource officers in our school buildings. Is simply not, cost effective or possible because the sheriff can't find that many people to work in those roles. But we are discussing important safety and security improvements, possibly additional personnel in all of our buildings. I would never advocate for arming staff. And again, if you have an opinion on that, that's fine. We just disagree. I would never advocate for anyone other than a trained law enforcement professional or trained military professional to carry a gun in a school. That's not something our trained professional educators should be doing. So instructional technology, improved safety and security measures, and continuing to look at what we're doing to deal with growth and how we can minimize whatever the future levy would be. And asking somebody for a 1 to 2 mil increase, incrementally, 1 mil raises taxes on a home by $35 on a $100,000 valuation. So if you're sitting in a $100,000 or $400,000 house, that's 4 times 35 for 1 mil. So that's $140. 2 mils is about $280, and so on and so on and so on. So, if you're asking somebody for a $300 increase every 3, 4, 5, 6 years or so, I think that's palatable to most residents. It's those big ones that are 6, 7, 8 mils that translate to be $1,200 increases that are tough to swallow. Now, the legislators are talking about a potential income tax cut. That's great. Cut income taxes. I'm all for it. And the state did it back in 2015. Governor Kasich gave us a 5% income tax cut. I got $15 back on my additional on my state taxes. Woohoo! We passed the levy in 16 and my property taxes went up $1,000. This is real tax relief for the resident. Funding the school funding formula is tax relief for all the residents of Ohio. It helps us all.
So you all really hit on this next question, but I'm going to say, give me like a 1-sentence answer to this because you've already kind of really, I think you can do it. If we ever get fairly funded, does that just mean no more levies? We've talked a lot about, or what will this look like for our taxes? So like, what's the elevator pitch for that?
I don't see that. I would not predict, that we would never, ever not have another levy in Olentangy. As we said, in the future, we're gonna have to have a levy for, additional buildings. We could potentially, what we've done in our last 2 issues is we've dedicated a certain amount of taxes to a permanent improvement fund, and it funds our technology resources and the maintenance on our buildings. So as our buildings have continued to age, we need to continue, just like we do in our home budget, we need to dedicate resources to take care of the buildings. This building was opened in 1991. So it's already getting up there in years. Again, a lot of Liberty is already 20 years old. Again, the useful life of the building was 100 or so years. So there always could incrementally be something, but I do believe it would be the fact that, again, as I said, every dollar we ask for, we get from the state is one less dollar we have to ask for from our residents. So instead of what we passed in 16 was 6.9 mil operating levy and a 7.4 operating levy, maybe it's 1 to 2 mils of operating or a mill of PI or something like that would be significantly less. And as Dr. Daverco said, if we continue to get that money, all it does is push out how far. There's districts in the state that haven't been on the ballot for 20 plus years because they get so much state funding. They get the incremental growth with the inside millage. They don't have levy. Don't know what a levy is.
When we funded, we didn't know then. I think last what it's going to look like.
All right, so this question is specific to one of our slides, and it's why does the formula change each year? Years 24, 25, 26, 27, each year is different on the graph.
I'll give my commentary and then he can give the numbers. And I can go back to the Taft years. With every governor, they create their own funding formula, and it's gone through all kinds of revisions. It's to the point where they would say, okay, we're going to pull a number out of the hat. It's $6,700 to educate the normal student, your average student. And that's what they did for years. That's what they did. They just assigned a number because nobody could agree. They couldn't agree. Okay, well, it costs maybe, $5,800 in Upper Arlington and $3,200 in Hamilton County. So they couldn't agree. So the formulas didn't make sense. And so that's why our numbers would change every year. I remember when we got $485 per student, and that was a year that we added 1,100 kids. And so that's why you had a 10.5 mil levy. And so my commentary is that the numbers changed because we didn't have a consistent formula. Now the Fair School Funding Formula provides that consistency. They assign a dollar value to every piece of the formula.
Yeah, I would echo with the answer to the last question too. The major advantage of this formula is that it adequately and equitably distributes through the calculation of base cost. It's going to give a more consistent view of what it really means cost-wise to educate a student. As Mrs. Wagner-Fiesel noted, there are multiple funding formulas in the past that just seem to stab at what cost should be assigned to educating a pupil. This formula actually takes a look at EMIS data. EMIS is Educational Management Information System. It's the great big computer algorithm that we throw all of our data in, and it computes all of our base cost to educate a teacher, what it costs to pay a principal, what it costs to run athletic programs. More than any other formula that we've ever had, this will compute across our state what it really costs to educate a child. And then we have a predictable, equitable, and it doesn't just simply say, everybody gets a flat 7,500. There should be a part of this formula, as is in any funding formula, a reliance on local effort. At least we'll know as we move forward that doesn't change every 2 years. So there is a consistent and reliable calculation of what it means to cost, or what it costs to educate a pupil. And then there's a consistent and reliable means of knowing what our share of that dollar amount will be as a local community. Makes planning for the future finances much, much more predictable and reliable for all of us.
All right. The last questions kind of fit in two different buckets. So the first one, we are going to comment on, is there a chance that Olentangy would be deemed too large and split into two districts? And I'm going to piggyback onto that with something you said earlier. Could we redistrict Berlin High School to put kids back to the other three high schools? So kind of all about the size there of the district and impacts.
Yeah, I'll take the first part. The state of Ohio has 610 school districts. Well, it depends on if Kelly's Island is counted in the count. Some years it's a school district, some years it isn't, depending on how many kids are up there. So a little over 600 school districts. Some of the school districts can have 400 kids in them, and then they have Columbus Public, which is the largest, with over 47,000 kids. We're the fourth largest in the state. I do not see the state ever coming in and saying you're too big. I can see the state going to the smaller schools and saying you need to consolidate, because that's where you get the savings. So you only have one superintendent instead of having, 4 in a county. But I've never heard anybody, want to say, let's split districts. They want to, the talk has always been, we need to consolidate.
Yeah, and we're able to capture, as you saw before, we spend less per pupil than the state average and much less than a similar district average. And you're doing that by capturing economies of scale in comparison to those other districts. So, if you think your taxes are high now, depending on where you live in the district, they would be incredibly higher if we split into 2 or 3 or 4 districts that, like we had before, when the district consolidated to form one district and closed Orange, Hall, Hyatt's, and Berlin. Thank you. So that would be significant. As for, we do look at redistricting as a way to relieve overcrowding. If you've ever been subject to redistricting, or your child, has been subject to redistricting, it's been my experience, no one likes that, based on the email feedback I get. So, it's, as we're looking at it, as we're trying to plan for the next 5 to 10 years, even with that solution, so we're going to move freshmen and sophomores out of 200 freshmen and sophomores out of Berlin to go to Liberty, 200 to go to Olmsted, 200 to go to Orange, and then 2 to 3 years later realize, oh my gosh, we still need the other school. We still need additional school because the growth is just not. I mean, in the 10-year projection by enrollment, attendance boundary enrollment, Berlin's scheduled to get to be about 3,800 students. So redistricting can always be a short-term measure that no one likes, but it's not going to be a long-term measure that will be sustainable.
All right. And then our final topic is Intel. So
Intel, what's that?
you haven't heard? So talk a little bit about which school districts will be directly impacted by Intel and how will we at Olentangy be impacted? And I think it would be good to kind of add in, about New Albany. Are they landlocked? Is there growth there with being close, Big Walnut and then us? And just how will we be impacted? What else will be happening? And how will Intel and other supporting corporations financially fund public education, given that they're joining our state?
Well, I talk to people I mean, I do think it's an incredibly exciting time to be in Central Ohio. We are experiencing such great prosperity in all of Central Ohio. Honda's building a new factory in Fayette County. Intel's going into Licking County. When the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission looked at where those sites could possibly be, a big factor outside of the tax incentives, and I don't know that I've ever seen exactly what the tax incentives Intel got.
Yeah. And it's not in the New Albany School District either. That's, downtown
Still.
Southwest Licking. And
That site was picked because we have such high quality water in Ohio and an abundance of water. That was a major factor in selecting that site. A major factor was availability of the workforce. A major factor was the livability for their workforce. And most of the high level people coming to Intel from the West Coast, the determining factor of where they decided to put it was, like, where could people live within an hour radius of that site? Because when you're traveling on the West Coast, you can live, a mile and a half from somewhere, and it takes an hour to get from point A to point B, unlike a place like Central Ohio. So if you draw the hour circle around the Intel facility, it goes all the way up to Marion and down all the way around the Outer Belt as an hour travel time to that place. But you tell me where people are going to live. When the determining factor for most of us of why we moved here was schools. Who they picking? They're picking here. Again, relatively, the tax rates are the same. So it's going to be us. It's going to be New Albany. It's going to be Big Walnut because of a proximity. But, I've talked to their officials. They better start thinking about a plan because they could quickly become Olentangy of 1990. And what we found, failing the plan is planning to fail. So I said in my farewell address, I walk on the shoulders of giants, I stand on the shoulders of giants because this district had a plan. And it ebbs and flows and changes because you just don't always know. That's why we're overflowing kids. People move into an area and they get a little bit ahead of us before we can turn and burn and build a building. But by and large, there's been nobody who's handled this growth explosion better than what we have. So, I think a broader impact of Intel is going to be on the economic cost to construct facilities. So we should be talking about building buildings sooner rather than later, because a $70 million high school can quickly turn into a $100 million high school and you build the exact same facility. I hope none of you need to replace a driveway and need concrete, because my understanding, it's not going to be available for the next 2 years because Intel's going to use it all. So, we're already seeing people move in. This is Davis has a new neighbor from Oregon, coming here to, so that's on the far eastern edge of our district. So, they're coming, and we know it. So, we'll be ready for them. Other?
I think that wraps up our questions and our time, unless I know we've hit 8:00. So I want to be mindful of the time that we've asked all of you. Did you have additional cards?
Oh, I should have said that. Yeah, the state budget has to be decided on by June 30th of this year. Now, they can extend it. They have done that before. Thank you, Mr. Householder. But yeah, so the goal is to have everything done by June 30th because the new fiscal year starts July 1st.
So this is timely and will continue to be timely through February, through June here. Thank you, all of you, for being here and absorbing all of this information. It's not, it's complex. It's not straightforward. And so we cannot thank you enough for listening and taking this out to your 5 friends or neighbors and continuing to help us advocate for this fair funding. Yes, Erica.
Yep. We hope to do a spring meeting to catch everybody up. And if we need to do strategic planning, like maybe an advocacy day at the Capitol, we can. We know that March 21st, the Ohio School Boards Association is going to do an advocacy day. So there we have some options. So we're not talking every night by any means. It's just helping us to plan.
Right. I don't want to speak for this group, but I'm sure they are happy to entertain questions as you leave if you have any lingering questions. And once again, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Stay warm, and we'll see you next time.